wonderful city of Glasgow. The first thing I would like to do is for you to give a very warm welcome to your fantastic candidates for the deputy leadership of the party. Please welcome your candidates. I think we're all agreed that there is very high calibre of candidates and the announcement will come shortly. But let's just reflect on the fact that this is our first party conference since we won the Scottish Parliament elections in May 2016. Of course, where our party leader, Nicola Sturgeon, secured her personal mandate to become First Minister of Scotland. But delegates, let me tell you, as your business convener, that this is the biggest ever conference in the history of the SNP. And it's not just the biggest party political conference in Scotland. It's the biggest party political conference in the UK. "3,000 delegates, 500 media, 120 fringe events, and 35 debates that we'll hold over the next few days, and still they come in. And of course, we've embarked on further delegate empowerment with the e-ballot to determine what resolutions are discussed through topical resolutions, because that's the SNP, an inclusive and democratic party for Scotland, an inclusive and democratic country. And as I look at all the delegates still coming in, the various tiers in this auditorium, the capacity of 3,000, I think must have been designed using a theodolite, but check it up, National Secretary. But as we fill this hall, I want you to now welcome your National Secretary, who will give you the announcement of the results for the deputy leadership of the party. Please welcome Patrick Grady, MP.
Thank you, Conference. I can announce the results of the ballot for Deputy Leader of the Scottish National Party. I will announce the results in percentage terms, and then a full breakdown of the votes will be published on the party website later today. In the first round, the percentage received by each candidate was as follows. Chris McEleny, 3.38%. Alan Smith, 18.6%. Tommy Shepherd, 25.53%. Angus Robertson, 52.5%. I therefore declare that Angus Robertson MP has been elected as Deputy Leader of the Scottish National Party.
Well, how many of you turned up to the hustings? Well, hands up, quite a lot of you. Well, first of all, thank you to all of you. On behalf of all of us, we spent weeks and weeks and weeks travelling from Tain to Peebles, from Aberdeenshire to the southwest of the country, and around 30 hustings, packed, lots of ideas, lots of questions. And I have to say, I've been absolutely bowled over to have been elected as the Deputy Leader of the Scottish National Party. So thank you to all of you who voted for me, and thank you to all of you who voted for the other candidates as well. I think it is a model election process, and all of the SNP, all of our members should be immensely proud about the constructive way in which we hold our internal debates. Thank you very much. Now, my campaign themes in this election were about leadership, they were about grassroots, they were about independence. I think it makes perfect sense for the leadership team of the SNP to be made up of our leader in the Scottish Government and Parliament, Nicola Sturgeon, our First Minister, and the leader of the SNP at Westminster. I think it makes perfect sense that our leadership team reflects Scotland. Nicola as a fantastic representative of this great city in central Scotland, myself a parliamentarian living, working and representing in a part of rural Scotland. We are the Scottish National Party. The clue is in the name. We represent the whole of the country and everybody who lives here, regardless of where we come from, and we should never forget that. We're the most effective political party in this country. Our strength comes from our members, our branches, our local grassroots campaigning, and our partnership with councillors and parliamentarians. And we need to make sure that our organisation, our policy making, our campaign techniques keep pace with the rapid growth in membership. And we need to empower everybody, every one of you, every one of our members who wants to play a part, because we have big challenges ahead and big opportunities. We are very, very close to independence, and we must start campaigning right now to persuade people who didn't vote yes in 2014. Securing 45% support in the independence referendum was a great achievement, but we must reach out to the 55% who voted no in 2014. And I believe that the SNP Deputy Leader has a big job to help make this happen, and I will work with Nicola Sturgeon to make this happen. And I'll also work with my fellow candidates who came up with some great ideas. All of us stood on distinctive platforms, and I undertook to help deliver on all of the best and the costed proposals. So to Tommy Shepherd, who focused on the organisational upgrade that we all want, there is much that can be delivered. To Alan Smith, who wants to protect our place in Europe, we must work together on that. And to Chris McElhaney, who highlighted the importance of our councillors and the forthcoming local government elections, we have to work together to get that right. Last but not least, you cannot run for an office like this without the support of some key people, and I'd like to make some special mentions to Nathan Sparling, to Peter Dempsey, and to my wife Jennifer, who put many, many hours, many miles, many social media updates, and many hustings behind them. To you, the members of the SNP, thank you for doing me a tremendous honour and electing me as Deputy Leader. I look forward to working for you, with you, and with Nicola Sturgeon for our country and everybody who lives here to deliver the independence that we all seek. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Here come the heroes. The everyday miracle workers, whose heads never bow, whose feet keep on walking, making a difference week after week. Here are the builders, the fixers and growers, and the ones who inspire, take risks, and create. Here comes the future. full of hope and ambition, always rushing to start living. The ones who can never stand still, or sit still either. Here are the forward thinkers who make our tomorrows. The ones who see differently, the ones who drive progress. And here are the undecided who still debate what can be and how we can get there. And here's the believers, for whom the question isn't if, but when. Who are they, these people? These carers and doers, innovators and dreamers. And yes, the occasional stumblers. They are the people of Scotland who push Scotland forward, who make Scotland stronger. We've all come such a long way together. And together, we can go even further.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the leader of the Scottish National Party and First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon.
Thank you. Conference, welcome. Welcome to the dear green place, the great city of Glasgow. A city that said yes in 2014, a city where every single citizen is now represented in the Scottish Parliament by an SNP constituency MSP. Let me begin today by warmly congratulating our new Deputy Leader, Angus Robertson. Conference, we had 4 first-class candidates to choose from. Indeed, we had more quality in our race for Deputy Leader than Labour managed in its election for Leader. So let me, on your behalf, thank Tommy, Alan and Chris for bringing their talents, their energy and their ideas to the contest. Each of you has a massive contribution to make to the future of our party. And Angus, you will be an outstanding Deputy Leader. I'm delighted to have you by my side and I look forward to working with you as we lead our party and our country to even greater success. Conference, over the next 3 days, we will talk in detail about our work to build a better, fairer Scotland. On Saturday, my conference address will focus on our plans to help business and create jobs, on our work to expand childcare and close the attainment gap in our schools, on our absolute undiminished commitment to invest in and reform our precious NHS. At the heart of every single one of our plans is the ambition to build an inclusive Scotland, a country where everyone has the opportunity to contribute to and the right to benefit from the better Scotland we are building together. A country where we cherish diversity and value people for the contribution they make, not one where we judge them on the country of their birth or the colour of their passport. And the contrast with the Westminster government couldn't be more stark. Last week in Birmingham, we heard an intolerance towards those from other countries that has no place in a modern, multicultural, civilised society. You know, on the day of the Prime Minister's speech to the Tory conference, the new leader of UKIP resigned. Perhaps she realised that her job and her party are now redundant. Last week, we saw the Tories adopt UKIP policy and Farage-style rhetoric, lock, stock and beer barrel. It was a disgrace. It shames the Tory party and everyone who speaks for it. But make no mistake, the right wing of the Tory party is now in the ascendancy, and it is seeking to hijack the EU referendum result. Brexit has now become Tory Brexit. The rampant right wing of the party is using it as a licence for the xenophobia that has long lain under the surface, but which is now in full view. They're using the result as cover for a hard Brexit for which they have no mandate, but which they are determined to impose regardless of the ruinous consequences. Worse still, they intend to do all of this with no parliamentary authority, virtually no scrutiny whatsoever, and to do it with complete disregard for Scotland's democratic voice. That is simply not acceptable. Last week, the Prime Minister told us how important it was to respect the democratic mandate of the people. I agree, which is why I say this to her today. It's high time you respected the 62% of people across Scotland who voted to remain. Of course, I know that 1 million of our fellow citizens voted to leave. They did so for a range of legitimate reasons, and as First Minister, I have a duty to listen to understand, and to respond to these reasons. But I suspect that many of those who voted to leave look now at the actions and the rhetoric of the Tories and think, that's not what I voted for. They may have voted to take back control, but I can't imagine that many of them voted to hand control to the unholy trinity of Boris Johnson, David Davis and Liam Fox. Boris Johnson, David Davis and Liam Fox, 3 men in a Brexit boat and not a paddle between them. I don't believe people voted for that. They didn't vote to throw economic rationality out of the window. They didn't vote to lower their own living standards or to sacrifice jobs and investment. They didn't vote for our businesses to face tariffs or for holidaymakers to need visas. They didn't vote for the scapegoating of foreigners. And they didn't vote for the voice of Scotland's people and our Parliament to be ignored. Yet all of these are clear and present dangers. All of that will happen unless we fight against it, and we will fight against it. Our single most important job is to protect Scotland's interests, our democratic interests, our economic interests, our interests in social protection and solidarity, and our interest in influencing the world we live in. There is no doubt that Brexit is a defining issue of our time. for Scotland and for the UK. It looms over everything. How could it not, given the implications for our economy, our society, our security, and our place in the world? So today I want to concentrate on what we will do in the months ahead to protect the interests of Scotland and, insofar as we can, the interests of the UK as a whole. Firstly, we will make our case in the House of Commons and in the Scottish Parliament. I can confirm today that SNP MPs will vote against the Brexit bill when it comes before the House of Commons next year. That bill will repeal the legislation that enacted our EU membership. Scotland didn't vote for that, and so neither will our MPs. But we will also work to persuade others, Labour, Liberals and moderate Tories, to join us in a coalition against a hard Brexit, not just for Scotland, but for the whole UK. We know that Brexit will damage our economy. Hard Brexit, removal not just from the EU, but from the single market as well, will be disastrous. The Treasury estimates that the cost of the UK economy could be £66 billion. Here in Scotland, 80,000 jobs could be lost. Wages would be hit by up to £2,000 and growth in the economy would slow. There is no rational case for taking the UK out of the single market, and there is no authority for it either. How many times did we hear prominent Leave campaigners assure us that leaving the EU did not mean leaving the single market? And the Tory party manifesto, on which Theresa May and every other Tory MP was elected, couldn't have been clearer. It said this: we say yes to the single market, but now we face a hard Brexit imposed by the hard right of the Tory party. Well, let me say this. The Prime Minister may have a mandate to take England and Wales out of the EU, but she has no mandate whatsoever to remove any part of the UK from the single market. And if the majority in the House of Commons stand up for what they know to be right, she will not get away with doing it. Friends, we will also assert the right of the Scottish Parliament to have its say. Remember, after the no vote in 2014, we were told that the Sewell Convention, which means that the UK Parliament can't make law in devolved areas without the consent of the Scottish Parliament, would be sacrosanct. Every party signed up to this. Now it seems the Tories are reneging. They want to rip up the Smith Report. Well, they need to understand this. Scotland's Parliament is the democratic heartbeat of our nation. To deny it the right to give or withhold its consent on an issue of such magnitude would be an act of constitutional vandalism. It is not on. As well as parliamentary action, over the next few weeks we will table specific proposals to protect Scotland's interests in Europe and keep us in the single market, even if the rest of the UK decides to leave. It's clear that beyond the hardline rhetoric, the UK government has no detailed plan. So the Scottish Government will set out a plan for Scotland. We will seek to make this plan a key element of the UK's Article 50 negotiation. It will require substantial additional powers for the Scottish Parliament. All the powers in our areas of responsibility that currently lie with the EU, and significant new powers too. Powers to strike international deals and greater powers over immigration. Powers not just to protect our economy, but also our values. UK ministers might think it acceptable to order businesses to create lists of foreign workers. We do not. Our ambition is to build an inclusive Scotland. Conference, the morning after the EU referendum, I said I would seek to find a way to allow Scotland's voice to be heard and our interests to be protected. And I said I would explore if that could happen within the UK. The plan we table will honour that commitment. But let me be clear about this. Its chance of success will depend not on us, but on the attitude of the UK government. Recent signs have not been promising. Last week, we heard from the Prime Minister a disregard for Scotland's democratic voice that was reminiscent of Margaret Thatcher, an assertion of Westminster constitutional supremacy that belongs in another century. High-handed pronouncements that dismiss Scottish opinion might delight the Tory party conference, but they are no longer acceptable to mainstream Scotland. So my message to the Prime Minister today is clear. Scotland didn't choose to be in this situation. Your party put us here. In 2014, you told us Scotland was an equal partner in the UK. Well, the moment has come to prove it. If you value the UK as you say you do, it's up to you to prove that it can work for Scotland. The ball, Prime Minister, is in your court. But hear this. If you think for one single second that I am not serious about doing what it takes to protect Scotland's interests, then think again. If you can't or won't allow us to protect our interests within the UK, then Scotland will have the right to decide afresh if it wants to take a different path. A hard Brexit will change the UK fundamentally. A UK out of the single market, isolated, inward-looking, hemorrhaging jobs, investment and opportunities will not be the same country that Scotland voted to stay part of in 2014. If that's the insecure, unstable prospect we face as part of the UK, then no one will have the right to deny Scotland the chance to choose a better future. On the morning after the referendum, I said I would protect Scotland's ability to make that choice. In our programme for government, I committed to publishing a draft referendum bill. I am determined that Scotland will have the ability to reconsider the question of independence and to do so before the UK leaves the EU if that is necessary to protect our country's interests. So I can confirm today that the independence referendum bill will be published for consultation next week. Friends, you know, friends, there's not a day that passes just now without someone advising me to hurry up with a referendum. And there's not a day that passes just now without someone advising me to slow down. Welcome to my world. But the responsibility of leadership is to act in the best interests, not just of our party, but of our country as a whole. The morning after the referendum, I said that I'd be guided at all times by a simple, clear test. What is best for the people of Scotland? Conference, that's the principle that I will continue to be guided by each and every day, and I know I can count on your support every step of the way. There's one final point I want to make before our conference gets underway, and it's an important one. When Scotland does come to take this decision again, whenever that might be, we must not take for granted how anyone will vote. It will be a new debate, not a rerun of 2014. We must not assume that people's views, yes or no, are the same today as they were 2 years ago. Instead, we must engage the arguments with a fresh eye and an open mind. The case for independence will have to be made and won. But let's never lose sight of this. We are one of the wealthiest nations on earth. We are rich in natural resources. We are world leaders in life sciences, technology, and renewables. We are at the cutting edge of advanced manufacturing. In tourism, in food and drink, we are unrivaled. Our foundations are strong. So if the choice we face is an inward-looking, insular Brexit Britain, governed by a right-wing Tory party obsessed with borders and blue passports at the expense of economic strength and stability, or a progressive, outward-looking, internationalist Scotland able to chart our own course and build our own security and prosperity, then know this: that is a case we will win. Friends, we stand for a fairer, wealthier, outward-looking, progressive Scotland. Let's get on and make it happen.
Okay, delegates, we now turn to formal business, and the first item is to hear the report of the Standing Orders and Agenda Committee, which then gives us the programme for the remainder of conference. I have questions to the SOAC report. Bill Ramsey, Elaine Wiley, and welcome to conference, Jerry Fisher. So, if delegates wish to speak, make sure you give the speaker's card to the stewards. And because there are so many people present and so many layers to the auditorium, if you want to speak and you've been called, make sure you're down the front and on the ground level, so that when I call you, I'm not waiting half an hour for you to come from the heavens. Bill Ramsey, first question.
Thank you, Derek. By the way, here's Nicola's speech. You might want to auction it at some point. I should
What
have
a good
I should have
character.
actually kept it
What a
myself
man
for
of
my own.
good character.
I should have kept it for my own branch. Damn. Bill Ramsey, Southside Central Branch. First of all, I want to congratulate the National Secretary for agreeing to show the preview of Ken Loach's film later on in conference. Thanks very much for that. And now my questions. As was said, this is the biggest conference we've had ever. Yet we have on the agenda the smallest number of resolutions, certainly since the first time I attended as a delegate, I think in 1982. So a question as to why the reduction in the number of motions. The second question is, why the reduction in the number of days? A few years ago it was 4, it's now 3. Now, as Equality Convener of the EIS, I thoroughly endorse the fact that we're having equality conferences, but in reducing the days of National Conference from 4 to 3 raises issues about the discourse that party members need to have to reflect the views of party members. And the final question is about the actual the publication of in the Standing Orders report. You'll see it yourself, colleagues, the number of motions and the way they are listed. 166 motions were submitted. Could I submit maybe in future that those 166, I don't expect you to publish them all, but to at least list the topics. I know you've listed them under groups, but at least list the topics that the motions that were submitted. This is very important, I think, because it allows the party to see what the members of the party are thinking, and I think that's a very important part of our discourse. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And Elaine Wiley to be followed by Jerry Fisher's question. Jerry, can you make sure you come to the front, please?
Elaine Wiley, elected member. It was just a quick point to make. Obviously, we have several contests for national office, including National Secretary, which is probably one of the most important internal positions in the party. I'm aware that we have a number of new members and new delegates who possibly don't know the candidates that are standing for this office. Previously, at National Conference, there was space in the agenda for hustings for national office positions. Could ask, it may not be possible at this conference, but if space could be made in the agenda for short hustings for the national office positions, if not at this conference, but certainly in the future.
Thank you. And final question from Jerry Fisher, and then I'll ask the National Secretary to respond to the questions and give the report. Good morning, Jerry. It's very nice to see you.
Drinking from the same glass as Nicola. Thank you, Mr. Convener, for accepting my card. I have 2 questions. Could I deviate just a second to thank Patrick O'Grady for the brilliant speech he made in the Westminster Hall when he put forward a debate on the claim of right and the sovereignty of the Scottish people. Critical that he did it, amazing that he did it in the Westminster Hall, because the sovereignty of the Scottish people is that which differs from Westminster totally, and is one of the major reasons why we can be different and should be different, where they claim the sovereignty of Parliament. 2 questions. One is on the matter of the topical resolutions choice and vote, which I take as a good idea, but didn't SOAC consider the possibility of putting up for voting and decision by delegates some of the motions that Bill has just referred to, which didn't get onto the agenda because of time? If in fact they had been put to a vote, then in fact we would have known that the delegates wanted to speak and use the time available from the topical resolution slot on a particular debate. The second question is purely for information. Can the National Secretary tell me whether in the 116 resolutions which were received, there was any resolution to change the constitution and aims of the party to delete from those aims the first half of the aims, which is the achievement of Scottish independence, as distinct from the ability of the Scottish Parliament set up under independence to make agreements with other organisations and countries in the interests of Scotland? Was there any resolution to change the aims of the party, to delete independence as our ultimate goal?
Okay. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you for your questions. Okay, I now call the National Secretary to give the report. Please welcome Patrick Grady.
Thank you, Conference. Can I add my own welcome to Glasgow and to the SECC? I'm not quite the local Member of Parliament, as you might have read elsewhere. That honour goes to my good friend Alison Thewlis. But about 15 minutes up the walk, 15 minutes up the road, you will find Glasgow North. And if anyone wants some recommendations for places to visit in the West End, I'll be very happy to share them in the exhibition hall. In terms of the questions that have come in, I mean, I will defer to Bill's greater experience, but 23 motions over 3 days is probably about average. We have time for about 7 or 8 motions every day, and that's what we have on the agenda this time round. The number of days of conference varies every year for a whole range of factors, not least to do with the size of conference, the logistics of getting everyone here and away again, and other events that might be booked in the venues that we want to use. So it's a constantly changing thing. We also had a lot of discussion last time at the spring conference that people wanted more time for debates and more time to discuss things, but a day is a finite amount of time. So if we want more time for motions, perhaps there have to be slightly fewer motions so there can be a more in-depth debate about them. What I would say in terms of all of these questions is there will be a fringe meeting, as we've undertaken to do, as we did at spring conference, hosted by the SOAC committee. That will take place at 12:30 today, and people that have questions about these internal processes are very welcome to attend that, and we can discuss some of this in more detail. Elaine's questions about hustings, she and I will remember that it was in fact the youth wing in our day that would organise informal hustings. That is entirely up to the youth wing if they want to do that kind of thing in the future. It was never part of the formal conference agenda. But of course, nowadays, most of the candidates standing for national office bearer position make themselves known by social media, and there have been some very interesting and lively campaigns going on for that. In terms of the topicals, topical resolutions by the Constitution, as Jerry knows well, he knows the Constitution well. So topical resolutions, Jerry, are for resolutions that come up since the deadline for the first sweep, so it wouldn't really be possible to put that kind of thing on. I think the topical pilot has worked well, and I'll announce the results of that in just a minute. But again, at the SOAC Fringe, we'll maybe discuss some of this in a bit more detail. Last year, I held up a 250-page conference handbook. This year, much of that essential information, the standing orders, the list of candidates, the office bearer reports, can be found in the conference app. But if anyone does need a hard copy, that will be available on request from the HQ stall. The packed agenda does mean we have to be very tight with time. 5 minutes max for movers of resolutions, 3 minutes for everyone else. And as Derek has said, if you intend to speak in a debate, please make sure that you're in the ground floor of the auditorium when you hand in your card, and stay there, because the logistics, I think, speak for themselves. As everyone knows, we put the topical resolutions for today to a ballot of members, and the resolutions which will be discussed at 3 p.m. are the resolution on Trident from Helensburgh branch, on child refugees in Calais from Glasgow Kelvin branch, on the Tory vision of Brexit Britain from Hamilton South branch, and on WASPI from Rosyth and North Queensferry branch. We'll make these available on the big screens and on the conference app, and again, a hard copy on request at headquarters. After the topicals, we will have the internal session, always an important part of our party's democracy, so please do stay for that if you can. The SOAC Fringe at 12:30 in the Dockart A room. And the election of national office bearers, including my successor, a wonderful phrase, will take place by an electronic ballot, and that should be arriving in your inboxes imminently. And again, ballot papers for anyone without an email address will be available at the HQ desk. This is my last conference as National Secretary, and perhaps in the internal session I'll have a chance to say a little bit more, but I do want to thank in particular all the members who've worked with me on SOAC over the years, and to our Assistant National Secretary, Emma Louise Purdy, who keeps everything going on the stage and keeps Derek and I right, for all of her help over the past 3 or 4 years. But I hope conference will approve the report, and we can get on with conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. Can I ask delegates, how many are you this first time at party conference? Can you raise your hand? Yeah, that's quite a fair number if you put your hands down, thanks. So I explain what we do now is I ask conference to approve the SOAC report, which sets the agenda for conference, and there are no cards in against, the questions have been answered, so I simply ask for you to show your support by applause, and that shows that the report is passed by acclaim. Very good. We have a conference then. Resolution 1, welcoming international citizens, is to be moved by Councillor Chris Cunningham and seconded by Stuart MacDonald MP. Welcome, Chris, of course, who has just won a council by-election.
Can I thank you for that, and can I indulge the Chair for a minute or two just to thank all of those who worked in the Garscadden and Scotstoun Hill by-election. It was a fantastic effort by the Anniesland branch members, by people across Glasgow, activists across Glasgow, and indeed from many parts of the country. We were well served with a great election agent in Kirsty McAlpine, a great organiser in Malcolm Mitchell, and tremendous support from MPs and MSPs. And from Susan Aitken and the whole of the Glasgow Council group. Ministers came to work in my by-election, and one even came from Perthshire to help. Nicola indeed found time herself to come and knock on doors on my behalf, and I'll always remember the look on people's faces as they opened the door to the First Minister. Any of you who have campaigned with Nicola will know that feeling over the last year or so. This by-election was won by hard work and good organisation, and my thanks go to all those who helped. Now, in terms of this resolution, there can be no doubt that the UK's political conversation has taken a turn for the worse since the 23rd of June. The chaos of a decision born out of misinformation, a government without a plan, and a body politic in Westminster that's taken leave of its senses isn't just a matter for political anoraks and journalists, or for city traders profiting from shares going up or the pound going down. That lack of leadership has impacted on ordinary people, our fellow citizens, be they from Eastern Europe, from Africa, or wherever, as intolerance has been given free rein and prejudice given license. All on the back of a vote to leave that had anti-immigration at its core. For Scotland, that vote and that intolerance is a double blow. For not only does it mean that new Scots are made unwelcome by people whose prejudice can now be more openly voiced, but it raises the prospect that, locked in a backward-looking union, inward migration itself might actually go down. And this is key. For immigration has been vital to Scotland over recent years. It's enriched our culture and boosted our economy. And the figures make it absolutely clear just how important it has been. Scotland's population has barely grown since the Second World War. Indeed, it actually fell by 2001 and has only shown an increase over the last few years by just 4%. By the time of the 2011 census. Over the same period, from 1951 to 2011, the population of England and Wales grew grew by more than 28%. 4%, 28%. That one statistic tells you everything you need to know about the failures of this union that we are in. That too many of our people felt that their future lay elsewhere. And I was one of those, as a 7-year-old taken across the world because the prospect of life in Australia seemed brighter than Edinburgh in the late 1950s. My sister and I came back, but of course the vast majority didn't. Our most valuable export has not been oil or whiskey. It's been our people, but it's been an export that we could ill afford to make. Immigration has been vital to us over the last few years, and immigration will be vital for our future. Bringing in new people, willing and ready to work and make their home in Scotland, paying taxes and contributing to our public finances, whose children will be born here, go to school here, and who will contribute to our national life. Standing up against racism and intolerance is not just right in itself. It's not just the decent and humane thing to do. It's the economically sensible course of action as well. Theresa May and the Tories may want to go back to a Britain of the 1950s. Shutting doors on the world may look attractive to some, but we must stand against this wave of angry nostalgia and be clear to all of our people, to all of Europe and to the wider world, that Scotland welcomes those who want to live, work, and settle here. And we want no part of the xenophobia and racism that is embittering our public debate. So let's be clear, let's say it loud and clear to those who have settled in our country. You are welcome here, and we want you to stay. It's my privilege to move this resolution. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chris. And I call Stuart MacDonald MP to second, to be followed by John Smart to move the remit back. But for the remit back to be considered, it would require a formal seconder from the floor. And if there isn't one, I can't call the remit back. I don't see or hear any formal seconder for the remit back. I don't. Therefore, Stuart MacDonald MP to second the resolution. And can I also say that Chris hit the time slot perfectly. And with your support, conference, I want every single speaker at conference to stick by the allotted times. Do you support me in that? And I'll remind you of it when I cut someone off with the magic button. Thank you very much. No pressure. Stuart MacDonald, MP.
Thank you, Derek. Colleagues, what better way to get this conference up and running than with a strong and resounding endorsement of the tremendous contribution to our country made by our new Scots and our international citizens. What better time to recommit ourselves to fight xenophobia in all its forms, and what better place to send that message from than Glasgow, a city of sanctuary and home to so many of Scotland's refugees and asylum seekers. Fellow delegates, in the fallout from June 23rd's disastrous vote and after last week's grim Tory conference, the toxic atmosphere surrounding all matters migration requires an urgent antidote. For too long, Westminster parties have competed in a vicious auction to see who could sound nastiest on immigration. From go-home vans to hostile climates, the Tories have won hands down. It's a game Labour should never have played, especially if all they had to offer were tacky election mugs saying controls on immigration. But while the political spectacle can occasionally be almost comical, its effect is anything but. And there should be no doubting, conference, that the relentlessly rotten rhetoric from too many Westminster politicians is a factor in legitimising and emboldening the rise in intolerance and prejudice that this motion condemns. So we are glad that the Parliament in Edinburgh takes a different tone, a different approach, but we should never be complacent. I know our Scottish Government will never be guilty of that complacency. It has worked immensely hard over weeks, months and years with both inspiring words of welcome and practical policies for integration that help mark the path to a modern, inclusive Scotland, at home with its evolving identity. Conference, meanwhile, at Westminster, we will continue to fend off the lowest blows the Tories attempt, and they are pretty low. But while what governments and politicians do is hugely important, every bit as vital is what each and every one of us do as individual citizens, each and every day in our workplaces, at the school gates, and down the pub. The battle against prejudice and intolerance depends on us all to win our own arguments, not just once, but over and over again, never letting the xenophobes win. And I know that's exactly what you'll do if the wonderful We Are Scotland hashtag we saw launched last week is anything to go by. Thousands of upbeat and gallus individual stories about why people love calling our vibrant and multiform Scotland home. We are Scotland, yes, but Theresa May, take note. We are also citizens of the world, and we know that's not only consistent, but actually, pretty obviously, two sides of the same coin. So together, conference, we can keep defeating the xenophobes, and so I ask you to pass this motion to tell the world that's exactly what we're going to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Can I call Kirsten Fraser to speak in favour of the resolution, to be followed by Dr. Muriel Puget? And as I say, if you put in a card, I expect you to be down on the ground floor, close by. Okay, Muriel? Oh, thank you. And to Kirsten, you'll have had your chance. Have you come? And then, please stand by Christian Allard. Muriel's a first-time speaker at conference. Give her a warm welcome.
Bonjour. I am French by birth, Scot by choice. And European by tradition, culture, and history. By the way, I represent Darlan Clagmannan. Thank you for being a delegate. I have lived and worked here for 40 years. I've paid my taxes. I've raised my family here, built a network of lifelong friends and colleagues, became a volunteer, a community councillor, a party activist. I'm also a proud member of a really active Women for Independence group in Clagmannan, Chair. I roamed the Scottish hills and glens all my life. This is my home. For 40 years, I have traveled back and forth between France and Britain without a second thought. It never crossed my mind that one day my presence here would have been questioned, ever. But on the 24th of June, it felt as if my world had turned upside down. It felt very personal. I was in turn angry, bewildered, outraged. Still, I'm an optimist, and I thought that being in Scotland would shield me from the worst, because my Scottish government and our First Minister were standing up for all of us, EU nationals, but also non-EU nationals. And I know it is easier to be a white EU national than a non-white EU national. in this country. 450 EU nationals gathered at the Corn Exchange this summer, invited by the Scottish Cabinet. It was quite an extraordinary and unique event, so I was still hopeful. However, then came the most vindictive, narrow-minded, jingoistic Tory conference ever. It was quite literally non-believable what I heard. In fact, what I heard was a British version of Marine Le Pen's discourse. Now, I do fear for the future, not so much for myself, but for all the young people who have come here to study, to settle, to work, full of energy and of ideas, hopes for a better future, contributing so much to our society.
That's time, Muriel.
Huh?
That's time, sorry.
All right, can I finish?
One
quickly?
sentence, of course.
Okay.
See, I knew you'd never stick by the rules. I knew it.
I thought it was 3 minutes.
I'll give you 30 seconds, but don't tell anybody else.
Okay. I just want to say this, that when politicians demonize the foreigner and the other, racial hate crimes rise on the streets. We have seen that in England. However, we have to have this message that migrants do not cause unemployment. Tory policy causes unemployment. Let's make Scotland a better place and let's stand against xenophobia. Thank you.
Thank you, Muriel. It was worth it. Thank you. Muriel, merci beaucoup. It was worth it for that very key point, so thank you very much. Kristen, I can give you 2 minutes.
Is it because I is French? Bonjour, conference, and it's fantastic to hear from somebody coming from the same country than mine who decided to make their home here in Scotland. And that's very, very important. We don't realize, and I need to thank you, conference, again, like I did before, for the welcome you give to Muriel, you give to people like me, over the years. It's so heartfelt, you know, from the bottom of my heart. Merci, conference. And our thanks, of course, have to go to Chris, of course, who brought, and well done, Chris, for this fantastic win, who brought this resolution to conference. And of course, to our First Minister. I think our leader has been fantastic right from the outset, making sure that EU citizens' rights will have to be respected. Not only this, but our parliamentarians have been exemplary as well. I can cite a few of them, like James Dornan, who made sure that he brought to the attention of Parliament an attack has been made on my name by somebody called Mr. Burnett, Alexander Burnett. I don't know if you heard about him, but I don't know, Ruth Davidson should choose better. She must have not got the memo from Theresa May. Theresa May said, it has not to be about the privileged few. There is no more privileged few than Alexander James Armstead Burnett of Leeds. This newly elected Tory MSP is, in fact, the great-grandson, 6 times the great-grandson of Nicholas I of Russia. What kind of democracy have we become? Now, for a Frenchman, I can tell you, it's a bit surprising. But what really was very, very surprising is the tone that Mr. Burnett decided to use. He thought that a French citizen like myself wouldn't be able, shouldn't comment on local politics. I think this is utterly disgraceful. He called that a Frenchman, an EU citizen, it would be bizarre for him to comment on local politics. This is not the country I came here 30 years ago. We can't let that happen. And I'm delighted that the xenophobic rhetoric of his Tory government has to be tackled once and for all. It's got to be tackled in this conference, in this hall, in this great city of Glasgow. And we've got to make sure that Scotland will not accept any kind of rhetoric, of xenophobic rhetoric. And I have to say something. Ruth Davidson did apologize about what Bernard said, but I'm still waiting for an apology from Alexander Bernard.
Thank you, Christian. It's great to see you, but I have to show some discipline to the other speakers or we won't get through the other resolutions. There are no cards in against. Chris, can I assume you'll waive your right to sum up? You will, thank you very much. Now, conference, I ask, there's no opposition, is the resolution... John, there was no seconder to the remit back, which means I can't call the remit back, so the remit back falls. So I now turn to the resolution. If you show your support, it's applause again. Is the resolution passed by acclaim? It is. And that's quite clear. Resolution 2 on fixed odds betting terminals to be proposed by Bailey Norman MacLeod and seconded by Frank McNiff.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, everybody. Fixed odds betting terminals are a very serious problem. They are the crack cocaine of the gambling so-called industry. They are highly addictive and they're potentially ruinous. They have led to the financial ruin, I beg your pardon, they've led to financial ruin for many. In some cases, in their desperation, including prompting individuals to indulge in theft and embezzlement on the way. They have led to the breakup of families, to physical and mental health issues, and in the most tragic of cases, even to suicide. They have turned many of the high streets of our towns and cities into a Las Vegas-type strip of a succession of local mini casinos. Allow me to remind you, or to tell you, in case previously you were not aware, that players of these machines are able to risk losing up to £100 every 20 seconds. My friends, that is faster than one usually can risk one's money in an actual real casino. In our largest city, here in Glasgow, it is estimated that every day more than £500,000 is ploughed into around 800 machines in just over 200 city betting shops. Please note, that's every day. £500,000 risked every day. The lowest robust estimate of the number of folk with a propensity and likelihood to become problem gamblers is 1 in every 20. And research suggests that it is these problem gamblers who account for a disproportionately high level of bookmakers' profits. Many believe that in this regard, the betting shops in effect are the pushers to the most easily addicted, and that they are pushing a most dangerous and potentially lethal product. The present legislative framework in this matter is simply a mess, with a fudged division of responsibility as between Holyrood and Westminster. The resolution before you today deliberately does not blame either Parliament or government. It simply seeks to suggest an answer, in part at least, to the problem being experienced, and implicitly encourages one, either, or both legislatures to get on with it. The resolution seeks to encourage and persuade, but not to prescribe in detail which government will require to do what. This is a serious matter. It needs sorted. The so-called betting industry has a slogan: when the fun stops, stop. These fixed odds betting terminals are no longer funny. It's time they were stopped. This resolution is a first step in doing that. I ask for your support.
Thank you. And the second is Frank McNiff, to be followed by Margaret Ferrier MP, who will be our final speaker with no cards in against. Frank.
Thank you, Convener. I wasn't expecting to second the motion, just speak for it, so I'm a wee bit caught off guard, so here we go.
You got lucky.
Eh?
You can second it.
Oh, I did second it? Okay. Can I first take the opportunity to praise the various Glasgow branches who have brought this resolution forward? As a resident of Clydebank, which is a town located in Scotland's second most deprived local authority of Western Bartonshire, second only to Glasgow, the concentration of licensed betting offices and fixed odds betting terminals is very much a problem we share with Glaswegians. In Clydebank, one of the largest employers is Clyde Shopping Centre, if you take account of all the shops present. This hall has the same area that exists 3 betting shops, 2 high-interest lending premises, as well as 3 high street banks. This hall. That's how close they are together. In an area where residents are less economically active, unemployment is higher, weekly earnings are lower, and benefit claimants are higher. To make things worse, and as the resolution speaks of, these betting shops, along with others, have these fixed odds betting terminals. That mean residents in this position are able to bet high, lose more, and very quickly. And as Norman says, a player can stake up to £100 with a gap of only 20 seconds between games. In 2015, the previous Local Government Regeneration Committee of the Scottish Parliament published their report on these terminals, as the powers over betting were being recommended but have now been placed under the Scotland Act 2016. In the report, comments were gathered from various individuals, agencies and companies. One individual said, "The worst harm I have suffered has come from using my debit card. When my daily cash withdrawal limit from an ATM has been exceeded, I can go into any bookmaker and use my debit card without any limits. This has often resulted in me losing control and spending everything in my account." It's the words "losing control" that hit me the most. These machines, as Norman has said, have been referred to as the crack cocaine of gambling. And when you hear words like "losing control," you can see the link. I therefore agree with the resolution when it mentions that these machines should be treated as a health and welfare issue. It's sad, however, that the new Scotland Bill, and it's just what we come to expect from Westminster, The new powers will not give the Scottish Parliament any real or effective powers to tackle this issue. The new power will allow the Parliament, our Scottish Government, to vary the number of terminals in new licensed premises, but not existing ones, meaning the current terminals in, for example, Clydebank, shall remain in place. The usual Westminster doctrine of let the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. However, luckily we have a Scottish Government who ensures fairness prevails, and I have every confidence that our Government will look at all current powers to control the number of licensed betting premises and therefore these terminals in our communities. Conference, I second the motion, and can I ask for your support?
Thank you, Frank. Margaret Ferrier MP will be our final speaker on this resolution. I should say sometimes speakers will put in a card simply to speak in favour of a resolution. If there's no formal seconder that's notified me by way of card, then I can select someone who supports the resolution to second it. And that's what I did with you, Frank, to give you the pleasant surprise of seconding the resolution. So Margaret doesn't appear to be in the hall. Now, that's the second time. Oh, Margaret. It is you. How many Margaret Ferrier MPs are there in the SNP? I mean, I know we're big. I know we've got a number of stewards that are parliamentarians. Too busy focusing on our speech. It's going to be wonderful as a consequence. Yeah. Please welcome Margaret Ferrier MP, our final speaker.
Thank you, Derek, and Conference, as an elected member of Parliament for the constituency of Rutherglen and Hamilton West, I find myself troubled by the proliferation of fixed odds betting terminals on main streets throughout my constituency. Many of you will share my concerns, but for those of you who do not, please take the time to consider the social harm that these machines can cause. Ever since the passing of the Gambling Act in 2005, these machines have become widespread and commonplace across Britain. As you've heard, they've been labelled the crack cocaine of gambling, and for good reason. Highly addictive, they stand accused of encouraging irresponsible gambling. Friends, the potential that these machines have to ruin lives is clear. There are 9 known suicides related to the use of fixed odds betting terminals, 2 of which have been within the last year. Some of you may have watched the recent Panorama investigation into fixed odds betting terminals presented by Wendy Bendell, whose partner Lee Murphy took his life after struggling for many years with his gambling addiction. 2 years ago, a 27-year-old man, Ryan Myers, sadly took his own life on the same day that he lost £500 on a fixed odd betting terminal at a shop not far from Liverpool. I am a member of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on fixed odd betting terminals and sit in the panel of the current inquiry being held by it on these machines. We have heard a wealth of evidence in the first 2 sessions, very difficult to listen to, and already it is not difficult to understand why a similar inquiry conducted at Holyrood calls for these machines to be banned. That will not go unchallenged. These machines are big business for bookies. Gamblers, as we have heard, are able to bet up to £300 a minute. People are literally able to blow their entirely monthly salary in a matter of minutes. Figures obtained by my local newspaper, the Rutherglen Reformer, suggest that in 8 bookmakers in the main streets of Rutherglen and Cambuslang alone, £1.2 million a year is spent on these machines. According to the Gambling Commission, British bookmakers earn around £1.6 billion profit annually from these machines. Friends, it's difficult to believe that this is achieved in a socially responsible manner, and I find it difficult to accept that these machines are not causing families heartache and damaging communities. I heard evidence from someone, as I say, at Westminster. He lost all his money, he lost his home, he lost his wife, access to his son, and his family as well. This is what he ended up with, and he was about to lose his home. Friends, please vote in favour of this resolution to ensure that we do our utmost to protect the most vulnerable from exploitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. No cards in against. Norman's waived his right to sum up. Can I ask conference, is the resolution passed by acclaim? It is, thank you. Now we turn to Resolution 3, School Governance Review, to be moved by Cabinet Secretary John Swinney, MSP, and seconded by Jenny Gilruth, MSP. Please welcome John Swinney.
Convener, Conference, when the First Minister appealed to the people of this country in advance of the election in May for a mandate to govern the country over the next 5 years, she put at the centre of our election message the subject of education, and particularly the raising of attainment and the closing of the attainment gap in Scotland, which has persisted for all of my adult life. And she's given the most clear, definitive political leadership this party and this country could ever have on the subject of education, to make sure that by the actions that we take, we do everything we possibly can do to enable every young person in Scotland to fulfil their potential. That is the purpose of education, and that is what this government is determined to deliver for the people of Scotland. And shortly after the election, the First Minister gave me the enormous privilege of being the Education Secretary, of giving the political leadership within government across our partners to make sure that we all focus on closing the attainment gap in Scotland. And as I've gone round Scottish education, I have seen enormous strength in the capability and the approaches taken within the schools of Scotland. But we've also taken international opinion to assess how strong is Scottish education and how can we improve it to ensure that we meet that mission of fulfilling the potential of every young person in Scotland. And we invited the OECD, the international commentators, to look at Scottish education and tell us what they thought. And contrary to what you read in the newspapers, they came back and gave us plenty of evidence of the strength in Scottish education, but they also asked us to continue to be bold and to reform. They told us that we needed to encourage more collaboration between schools and between public authorities to make sure that educational practice isn't just good in one part of the country, but it's shared right across the whole country, and that we make sure that wherever a young person goes into a school in our country, they are able to access high-quality education that will meet their needs. And the second thing they told us to do was that we had to put more control into the hands of schools to enable schools to decide and to determine what is right and best for the young people in those schools. And that will vary in different parts of the country, and I see that as I go around the country looking at the different challenges that the teaching profession face in every part of Scotland. So for me, the priority is making sure as we address that challenge of closing the attainment gap in Scotland, we do everything we can with the benefit of international opinion and international expertise to take the necessary steps to deliver the education system that can be truly described in Scotland as a world-class education system to meet the needs of people in Scotland. Central to that must be the emphasis on learning and teaching, on making sure that the teaching profession are liberated from the bureaucracy that has clogged up the system to focus on teaching young people in Scotland. And I've taken big steps in the course of the last few months to simplify the bureaucracy in schools by clarifying curriculum for excellence, by tackling the issue of bureaucracy in local authority management, by tackling the issue of over-assessment by the Scottish Qualifications Authority, and all of those reforms are now making a difference. I was in a school yesterday hearing from teachers across the school the difference that these reforms have made to enabling them to focus on what really matters for young people in Scotland, and that's on learning and teaching, on making sure that young people are able to have access to the highest quality teaching experience that they possibly can do in fulfilling their potential. So we're in a position now with clear political leadership to focus on closing the attainment gap, to enable young people to fulfil their potential, that we need to look at what else is necessary to address that international call for action within Scottish education. And our governance review is designed to do that. It is an open consultation. It is a consultation designed to invite the contribution of people from across the country to determine how best we can strengthen schools in our localities and in our communities by making sure they have the strongest possible connections with parents, with other stakeholders in the community, with community interests, so that schools are the living, breathing heart of every single one of our communities across Scotland. And the Governance Review invites the contribution of parents and teachers and pupils, and I was at one of the consultation sessions just this week, as to how we can strengthen schools with that message and with that approach. And the second thing that the Governance Review does is discuss how we can best ensure that in schools in our country we can have the resources and the decisions taken that best meet the needs of young people in those schools. And in all, we are a party that represents the wide diversity of background and experience and opinion within Scotland. And we must know that in every single part of our country, the educational experience and circumstances for every young person is different. But we must all be committed to the same outcome. The same outcome is making sure that we deliver the very best education system in every single part of the country that best meets the needs of every young person, and we can do that by making sure our schools are strong and effective in delivering that education for the young people of Scotland. Now, there are two, in conclusion, Convener, there's two myths I want to bust about all of this. It's been suggested that this review will involve head teachers becoming accountants, and that local authorities will not have democratic control of education in Scotland. I make it clear to this conference today, neither of those things will happen. Local authorities will remain democratically in control of education in Scotland. Head teachers will not become bureaucrats, but I want to make sure we take the steps that will strengthen Scottish education to deliver every opportunity for the life chances of every child in Scotland. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, John. And the second is Jenny O'Rourke, MSP, and Graham Sutherland will be next to move the remit back, to be followed by Craig Lundy, who will second the remit back. Jenny O'Rourke.
Thank you, Conference. The last time I was stood here was as a first-time candidate in March. It feels good to be back as a new MSP, part of the SNP's historic third term in government, part of our National Parties Conference, the biggest party conference in the United Kingdom. Conference, a good education is the most important thing that we can give Scotland's children. In England, the Tories now want to bring back grammar schools, to help the few and exclude the many. I am proud that here in Scotland, the SNP government believes that a good education should be for every pupil. And we have to ensure, though, that we are getting it right for every child. And we know that that isn't always the case. By age 5, the attainment gap in vocabulary is 13 months. By S2, our wealthier pupils do twice as well in maths. And by the age of 22, low attainers are more likely to be unemployed, work part-time, earn less, and stuck in low-paid jobs. Conference, closing the attainment gap isn't just about kids doing well in exams. It's about breaking and ending the cycle of poverty. And I say this to you today, Conference, in the great city of Glasgow, where my granddad was born up the road in Springburn, where I studied at Glasgow University, where my youngest sister is right now teaching a physics class in a classroom just across the Clyde. All in the same city where the average life expectancy is the lowest in the country. Education makes a difference. And what we've always done isn't working for our pupils. The School Governance Review is tasked with changing that, with focusing on schools in terms of sharing knowledge to improve life chances. We must challenge the inequity which begins to emerge at the chalk face and follows our pupils out of the school gates. Conference, I want to tell you a wee story about a boy that I taught. We'll call him John. Every day in primary school, John was in trouble with the head teacher. Every day for 7 years, he was sent to the head teacher's office. He learned that if he misbehaved, that was the sanction. At high school, he was sitting in my class one afternoon. He started to misbehave. He said to me, "Miss Gilruth, do I get sent to the head teacher now?" John was 11 years old and in S1 at the time. That was how he had learned to be treated. I could tell you about John's home life, about how he struggled to concentrate in class, about how he was a clever wee boy with potential. Conference, if we are going to transform Scotland's schools, then we need to engage with pupils like John. We need to make them realise that their voice matters, that their qualifications matter. In 2007, an OECD report showed that parents' backgrounds matter more in children's attainment than their school does. So it is essential that we engage with parents and communities in the governance review. An inward-looking system which only speaks to itself isn't working to improve the life chances of Scotland's poorest children. As a party of government for the last 9 years, we've ensured transformational change in Scotland's schools. But Conference, we cannot afford to be timid, as my former boss said only this week. That's why the First Minister has appointed John Swinney as a Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills. And Conference, I know that the Deputy First Minister is absolutely committed to close the attainment gap, to empower teachers and to enable schools to share what works. That's
Jenny.
how we'll get it right for every child. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Graham Sutherland to move the remit back, to be seconded by Craig Lundy. And Susan Aitken stand by to speak in favour of the resolution.
Conference, I just want to say, first of all, that I have no doubt whatsoever about the SNP government's passionate commitment to reducing the attainment gap in Scotland's schools and of the commitment to that ideal of John Swinney. However, I do have very serious concerns about the way that we're trying to go about narrowing the attainment gap in our schools. And I'll demonstrate these reasons here in my arguments for the remit back. First of all, this may seem a small thing. When I read this resolution, I felt I had to go looking for my red pen. I can't help but feel that the resolution could have been better written, and it should have been written in proper sentences. Small point, but I think that is important. I also felt when I reread over the resolution, I couldn't help but feel that it had been written by somebody who has a low level of knowledge and understanding about what Scotland's schools are actually doing at the moment. They already practice devolved management, quite a high degree of it. Some of you might remember that devolved management was part of a package of measures introduced by the Tories in the 1980s, introduced by the Tories as a kind of Tory Trojan horse to undermine the role of Scotland's local authorities. Schools already practice clustering, where they work with other schools in the neighbourhood on areas of common ground. Schools also have a very strong duty to encourage parental involvement. School boards, again, that was something introduced by the Tories as an attempt to undermine the role of local authorities. And of course, in many schools, the school boards were turned round and they worked very well for our schools. But note, the school board policy worked more effectively in those areas that were already advantaged in Scottish education. I also felt that the resolution here, for such a very important policy, is lacking in detail and clarity. Since we already have devolved management in schools, we already have clustering, we also already have parental involvement, what exactly is going to be different about this policy? And although John did mention about workload, I can't help but feel there is also a workload issue here. When devolved management was first introduced, we had the creation of business managers in the secondary school. They don't have them in the primaries. And my brother's a primary head teacher, and I know what his workload is like, and I know that he is concerned about these proposals.
That's time, Graham.
I also have to say that the attainment gap, it's linked in here that all we need to do is to do this, which is in the resolution, and the attainment gap will be closed. I have to say that we've had devolved management and the attainment gap has widened. Our policy needs to be much more visionary, and it needs to be more detailed, and we need to expand our horizons on it. I am very concerned about where we're going, and I think the best thing we can do for this party, because it is our flagship policy, we have to get it right, is to remit it back and for the party leadership to come back with something that's more fleshed out. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. And Craig Lundy to second the remit back, to be followed.
I asked Craig to second my...
Sorry, I determine who speaks at conference, and I have the card that says
You also,
Craig Lundy.
you also have a card from me moving the remit back. You've put that aside, which is fine, and I asked Craig to second my remit back. Will you allow Craig to stand back and allow me to second the remit back?
Is Craig withdrawing his card? Right, well, if you're withdrawing your card, that's who I was calling, so Bill, you can speak. But in future, if people withdraw their cards, they have to let me know for the good conduct of this conference.
Okay,
thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Convener. Bill Ramsey, Southside Central Branch. I'm also in the Strategy Subcommittee of the Educational Institute of Scotland, but I'm speaking in a personal capacity. That you've got to understand. I'm doing this as an ordinary party member. The last time I wrote an article for Common Space in a personal capacity. In the Sunday Times, we had them saying the IS wants a big tax and big whisky. So I'm speaking in a personal capacity. That's got to be understood. The second point is I'm using the remit back to actually to try and develop the discourse that John quite rightly has opened up that will close on the 6th of January. And I've got some questions to put him, and the mover of the remit back actually covered some of my points. What powers will a head teacher have? I'll take an example. I put in an amendment that was not tabled, seeking that national conditions of service of teachers be retained. So I would hope that John will make that point in his summing up, that national conditions of service of teachers will be retained. What powers will go to head teachers? Will they, for instance, as in Gordon Brewer put to him in the Politics Today programme, the Sunday Politics 2 weeks ago, will head teachers, who are employees of local authorities, have unilateral powers to employ people? There are issues around that needs to be teased out, and hopefully during the consultation we will see that. And one other point, or two other points. John referenced OECD report. I'm assuming he's referring to the Improving Schools in Scotland, an OECD perspective 2015. And at the heart of that, it talks about a leading from the middle. The issue I have with that report, and it's 180 pages, and in the main I agree with the broad thrust, is that it's a bit like the Old Testament. It actually has about 3 or 4 different definitions of what leading from the middle is. And maybe John can say, well, can confirm that that's the report that we should really be focusing on during the consultation. And the final point is this. The consultation finishes on the 6th of January. I'm assuming then there will be a legislative consultation on, when the Scottish Government puts together its proposals. I mean, I almost take that for granted, but if John could just confirm that. And I will probably, after John has confirmed these things, I will probably withdraw my support for a remit back and let the motion go ahead. But since I'm not in charge of that, it'll be for others to decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. First of all, can I ask, I think it's important that I continue some debate here. Can I ask for your permission to extend this session by 5 or 10 minutes? Okay. Susan, can you speak in favour of the resolution? I can give you 2 minutes. I can also give Amy McNeice-Meehan 2 minutes to speak against the resolution. Susan Aitken.
Okay, thanks very much, Conference. Just to say I'm very proud to be a member of a party whose leaders have put education and the well-being of and the life chances of Scotland's children at the heart of our values. And our opponents will say that Scottish education is in crisis. That's simply untrue, and it's completely unsupported by all the evidence. But we do have inequality between the attainment achieved by children from the poorest and the wealthiest backgrounds, and that gap isn't closing fast enough. Here in Glasgow, we've made significant progress in attainment in recent years, and enormous credit should go to our teachers and head teachers, and especially our children and young people for that. But we still have Scotland's biggest attainment gap, and as someone who aspires to lead this city after the local authority elections next year, it's my view that the biggest priority for the governance of Glasgow should be to close that gap and ensure that every single child and young person in this city is given an equal chance to fulfil their potential. It impacts directly on our city's economy, on our ability to sustainably grow our population, and above all, on the life chances of too many of our young people. So I welcome the determination of our Education Secretary to provide local authorities, schools, education leaders and classroom teachers with the tools that they need and the clear plan of action he's set out to add value to the education and learning experience of Scotland's children. And I would commend some of the speeches that he's made in Parliament recently to colleagues, and particularly the mover and seconder of the remit back, where he's answered, in fact, many of the questions that they've raised today. The greater ability that we give to our head teachers and classroom teachers to improve the quality of a child's school experience, the more chance we have of helping that child to attain to the best of their ability and to overcome the barriers that they might face in other parts of their lives. And local authorities and local councillors should have absolutely nothing to fear from this. Quite the opposite, in fact. Working in partnership with well-equipped and empowered frontline staff, with the politicians providing a clear policy vision and democratic control, and teachers...
Sorry, Susan, time's up. When I say 2 minutes, I mean it. Amy, if you come and speak now for 2 minutes, please. And Amy, no pressure. I know Amy is a first-time speaker at conference. Amy McNeice-Meakin, to speak against the resolution.
I'm Amy McNeice-Meakin, Political Education Officer for Leith Walk Branch. And we had a bit of a chat about this, and our two main objections, one around the language. Although in theory it sounds democratic, there is, I think, a political issue in that it also sounds worryingly like the Tories' academy plans, and we can't afford to be associated with the toxic proposals emerging from this Conservative government, particularly at a time when Jeremy Corbyn is planning another charm offensive to win back Scottish voters with a promise that Labour is returning to its roots. It could be disastrous to invite any comparisons with policies put forward by Theresa May. I come from a family of doctors and teachers. I have huge respect for these professions. I work for the Japanese Ministry of Education. I taught at a college, classroom instruction, curriculum development, teacher training, and I think I speak for every educator here when I say you go into teaching because you love your subject and you love working on behalf of children and young people, not because you want to be a manager. And taking teachers away from doing those things that they love, where their key skills lie, I don't think is a recipe for future success. It seems part of a larger global trend to value managers over practitioners, hospital administrators over junior doctors, etc. There seems an expectation that in every line of work, you should be competitive, show ambition, and progress by moving up the career ladder into management. And no longer are we really valuing dedicated teachers who are happy to spend 40 years in a classroom teaching generation after generation. Now, I'm completely here, on my own behalf, but I'm also a Unison trade union convener for children and families for the City of Edinburgh. And I've observed firsthand the number of workplace disputes that ultimately are tracing back to stressed staff working under overstretched head teachers. They basically may have trained in pedagogy or English literature, but now they're supposed to be experts in employment law, child protection, international diplomacy, only without the salary that's attracted by experts in those fields.
Amy, final sentence, please.
Okay, so please don't load another level of responsibility and have teachers taken away from students sitting in front of local interest group committees.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, now to the summing up. Graham, would you like to sum up on behalf of the remit back? Again, I did ask that speakers be as close to the front as possible. I know you didn't know I was moving straight away, but speakers can come to the front. Saves the delay. 2 minutes.
Yes, for the remit back, if I can just sum up, again, as I said previously, and some of the other speakers endorsed that, the lack of detail in this resolution, we need much more information exactly what the party leadership, the Scottish Government mean about this initiative. It needs to be fleshed out. My feeling is the evidence, and I know recently Professor Brian Baud, a very eminent Scottish educationalist, had an article, and I think it was the Herald about this, and also Douglas Marr, an educational consultant. They did mention about devolved management, and they did say, yes, it can be a very good thing. It can make things different if schools can target the resources to those children most in need, but it has been tried and the attainment gap has widened. So therefore, the kind of package that we're putting forward here, all very worthy if we can get schools to cooperate together, if we can get more parental involvement, but parents also have jobs and have lives as well. And in some communities, it's very difficult to engage parents as much as you can in the more advantaged areas. So what I'm saying is basically we need to look wider than just these examples that are in this resolution. We need to be looking at things like structures as well. 3 countries have closed their attainment gap very successfully: Estonia, Finland, and Switzerland. And to do that, they made major structural changes to their education system. That's what we need to do, and I think that's what's missing from SNP policy. And it's vital that we re-examine ourselves, because if we fail in this, we've nailed our colours to the mast that we're going to close the attainment gap, then it has consequences.
Thank you, Graham. Deputy First Minister, to sum up for the resolution, a strict 2 minutes.
Thank you, Convener. Let me take up the last point that Graham raised. We have no alternative about the attainment gap. We've committed ourselves to closing the attainment gap for young people in Scotland. This party has nailed its colours to the mast, and we owe it to the young people of Scotland to do exactly that. That is what we must focus on. Now, on Bill Ramsey's points, I've already confirmed in Parliament that national terms and conditions will be retained. Leading from the middle is the concept that's in the OECD report that Bill referred to, and it is important that we recognise leading from the middle means about building school capacity to deliver better education for young people. There will be a legislative consultation about any proposals that flow from the governance review. And the last point that Bill made on powers to head teachers, I want head teachers to be, and this relates to Amy's point, I want head teachers to be the leading educators in their schools. Not the leading bureaucrats, not the leading business manager, the leading educator, leading a team of professional educators that are focused on the needs of young people in that school. Needs that will vary from area to area, but whichever school a young person comes into in Scotland, we've got to make sure their education is world class, and this governance review is about making sure that we do that. And my last point is this. Graham said there that we need to have structural change. This governance review is about exploring all of those questions. So why we should have a remit back passed when the resolution is actually focused on the thing that Graham has suggested we should be doing is a bit of a mystery to me. The government is committed to closing the attainment gap. This party is committed to closing the attainment gap, and the governance review is an essential ingredient enabling us to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you to all the speakers. Can I apologise to the speakers that I was unable to call who put cards in. Delegates, we will now turn to the vote. Only delegates can vote in this decision. What I'll do is I'll take a vote on the remit back, first of all, and I'll ask people to vote in favour and then against the remit back, and then a vote for and against the resolution. So those in favour of the remit back, please show. Cards down. Those against the remit back, please show. Thank you. Cards down. The remit back falls. Those in favour of the resolution, please show. Thank you. Cards down. Those against the resolution, please show. Cards down. Thank you. The resolution is carried overwhelmingly. Now, that's the end of this session. I'll look at trying to accommodate Resolution 4 elsewhere in the agenda. But thank you very much for your attendance, and I'll see you after lunch.